Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to have a relatively quick topic. It has to do with my 1600 Pro and diffraction artifacts that you sometimes get on really bright stars. I was wondering if the multi-scale gradient correction would pull some of this out. The answer is no. I already tested that, so save yourself the trouble. This is a narrow band, but it can happen in any filter type. It's not the filters that cause it. It has to do with what's called the Talbot effect, and there's a good write-up on cloudy nights explaining what causes it. I'm not going to go into that so much as I have a method I've utilized for situations where you get these diffraction rings for this particular sensor on really bright stars like Allen Attack. As you can see here, this is my Horsehead hydrogen integration I did. Gonna see how it's in there. Previously, I did some cloning, and even though I don't like unnatural modifications to backgrounds, I really went ahead and did that because I prefer that over this. In my Horsehead final image, this, and I'm going to reprocess this. You can still see it, but what I did is I flared out this star more, kind of to just override it. Instead of toning it down, I just went the opposite direction. I plan on reprocessing this photo with a new technique. You can see here a little bit out of it too. Not as bad, but also when I first started photography, this is a really bad process photo, but you could see the lensing. They call it microlensing. It's not microlensing. It's the refraction effect going on here, and it's because the coating of the glass on the sensor is such that it can cause this to happen, but only in certain situations. So that you can see, I didn't know how to deal with it back then. I just produced my photo, and in a later version, I still didn't know how to deal with it. But it's, I'm learning how to do color. You can see it here, still kind of laid in there, where I probably did some stamping to deal with it, to tone it down. But I have to reprocess this one as well. The technique I'm going to use utilizes a fantastic script by Seti Astro's called Blemish Blaster. So Blemish Blaster, which we'll launch in a minute, you can't have it open while you're in open photos afterwards. Here is the target I'm looking at. This is about 5 hours each, maybe might be more than that, of the Butterfly Nebula IC 1318, not the more famous Butterfly Nebula from NASA. You can see these different types of refraction here effect going on. Technique you can use in the new PixInsight, by the way. When you're doing this, you hold down Control, drag this over, and it syncs these. You can sync multiple. So if I sync these, as I zoom in, we can look at these in comparison to each other, see the different patterns. So it's not as bad in the hydrogen as it is in the others, and the oxygen. This would be true of the blue filter as well. Those two wavelengths are affected a lot more. So one thing to note is I would utilize a reference photo. If somebody else already processed, go online, get a reference photo to get an idea of what the background looks like when this is processed. And be careful that try as much as possible not to eliminate nebulosity. Like in this corner right here, this is real nebulosity. This is not from the effect you're seeing here. Like over here, there's not nebulosity in the O channel, oxygen channel. There's some in the sulfur and hydrogen. So we want to maybe treat these a little bit differently than we would this larger pattern in the oxygen filter. So let's get started. So the first thing I would do, and you could change your workflow depending on what you're doing with your stars, if you're using RGB stars or if you're doing simulated RGB from narrowband stars, or if you're just going all white with your stars in your narrowband processing. First thing I do is take all of the individual SHO integrated frames and remove the star exterminator, skip generating the star image, and run that on each of these frames. I've already done that ahead of time and produced a new version of this file. So here's the starless sulfur. And we got the stars sitting here. Let's did a pretty good job of dropping all of the pattern. I keep wanting to say microlensing. It's not what it is. Microlensing is something else. It's often called microlensing. The micro lenses are affected, but we're really talking about a reflection artifact. Some people are calling it that. But so in this case, we got this pattern here. I want to keep the nebulosity down in the bottom left. When a Seti Astro, you can hit Blemish Blaster. On these targets, I'm using a couple different settings. I'll play around here again to remember exactly, but this one, I believe, we'll start with 1/3 on feathering. We're going to go freehand. We're going to turn on auto STF. I'm going to back out a little bit from this. We're going to find the affected area. When you're in freehand mode, you hold down the shift key. Hold down control if you want to make straight lines, but in my case, I just want to circle this area and try not to include everything down here. I want to get a little bit outside of these black bands in here, and then I'm going to execute that. You can test this, over and over till you get something you're happy with. And it's going to use the area around here to modify the inside. All right, so there we are. Now this is kind of dark in here, so I'm going to run it again. Taking my feathering up. Okay, this is the one that take the opacity down 75% and the feathering to 50% on this. Don't want it to take away the stuff too quickly. I want to do it in iterations. I'm going to draw around this whole area. Execute. Okay, there's still some in there. Switch over to circles. Hitting it again. Trying to get it to blend this. Now it's looking more acceptable. This is where I could use this particular one. Once we do denoising, we do reintegration of these frames together, it's going to work out pretty well. It's going to take care of that. Once I lay the stars back on top of it in the final image, it's like you really won't notice it. However, I experimented. You saw how I was doing different types of areas and redoing it. I did experiment and got, after some iterations, with feathering between 1/3 and 1/2 and opacity between 3/4 and 100% combinations. You're just gonna have to play with it. When you're done with that, I didn't hit this. You need to hit apply to main image. I did not do that on that particular one, but here is where I ended up the last time I ran it. Okay, you can kind of see that circle a little bit. Here's with the stars back in it later. So the star itself is going to fill in the center. You don't need to worry about how dark this very, very center is. I'm going to run it one more time. I'm going to do that process one more time. Go with this a little bit faster. So the multiple circle approach is another way to do it. Take us down to about 75 again. I'm going to leave feathering at 1/2, 0.5. I'm going to do another freehand around this. Go wider. Much wider this time. Alright, so I like how it took a lot of it out. I'm going to switch over to circles again. I feel like this pretty well when you give it something different everywhere. I can pull this in. Again, the star's going to cover this area. We don't need to worry about that very middle. You can put multiple of these in here. If you right click, it'll take all these away. Start over. So if you're like not happy with where you put something, just putting different ones in here to give some variation, less aggressive. So that's pretty good right there. It'll be apparent here, but it will not be apparent once you integrate the subs. You'll notice it because you worked on it. It's like a lot more apparent because you worked on it. So you got, your eye continues to, you know, remember where it was. And then you would say apply to main image. So there's a way to get rid of that. Again, you look at the final version I have versus what we started with. I'm going to synchronize these. Bring them on here. Control drag to there. Now if I go over to where this is the difference, and I kept the nebulosity in the corner. And then once the stars are added back in, sync that up. Be able to see the whole thing here. I modified the background to make it abstract. And then where we are afterwards. Zooming out, it's way less noticeable. That's sulfur. So hydrogen is not affected as much. Be way less aggressive on this one. Take us back down to 75 again. Take us down to a third on this one. I believe that worked better. Do the circles on the outset. Let's try that out. We just take circles and round this thing. Want them to come out quite a bit. See how that really took it out. The star's going to go right back on top of here. But I could do one more just to save. And that did a pretty good job already. Really killed off that pattern, which is really what we're after. And then apply that main image again. I'm not going to do that because I already did it. So we have this original pattern. Let's do a sync with control and a control. If you ever want to unsync one of these, like for some reason, if you right click the bar and say desynchronize, it'll remove it. See, it removed it. There's a little orange dot. I'll put that back on there and center it on this one right here. So you can see we got rid of the pattern, and when we brought the star back in, it's really killed off that pattern. Again, the hydrogen one's not as affected in this case. We'll go to the next one. Might potentially be the most challenging. So we have oxygen. Now there's a great big halo on here. When this reintegrates with everything else, that's going to get mostly taken care of. So I wouldn't worry about that. That's okay. In some cases, it might actually make it look unique or cool. But this, boy, this is atrocious. Look at this mess. All right, I believe I worked with a third on this as well. I think let's go with 100% opacity and play around with this a little bit. The STF on, center this up. Now I played around with some techniques on this because the signal level is so muted on this one. You could, in this case, almost just stamp out this one because it's, you know, there's not a lot of signal around here, but it's hard to tell. Now if you had a much longer capture, you know, so you had 10 or 20 hours of signal on here, that could maybe be different. In this case, you could just clone stamp it. I'm going to do it this way just to see what we get. So I am going to use a circle. I'm going to come right from the middle first, and I'm just going to hit it. And I'm going to go wide, like really wide from this, because I want it to really use this dominant muted pattern on the outside, inside here. So we hit execute. And I did not drop the opacity because I really wanted to clobber the whole thing. Now, see how it's like it's still got a dark circle in there? So I'm going to undo it for a second. I'm going to drop the opacity down some, feather it up a little more, run it. All right, so it's still in the middle there when I ran it that way, but it didn't like get so aggressive. So another thing you can do is come to these edges with circles again, go to the center of the object coming from outside. Hit in the middle there with this. Doesn't have to be super accurate. They don't have to be the same size. If you right click, it'll drop the last one. And you can redo that circle. Same settings. Again, clone stamp in this situation might be the best because there's just not signal showing here. But this is another way you could get it done. And then you would apply to the entire image when you're happy. So I'm going to show what I ended up with on this particular one using Blemish Blaster instead of clone stamp. Again, clone stamp probably better on this filter. So you can see what happened when I brought it back in. Now there's a little bit of a flat. I didn't get it all out on this sample here. Again, clone stamp's probably better on this one. But when you come out, back out, once this is integrated, you're really not gonna know. That's the individual frames. Now here is integrated unmodified SHO of those, and you can see there's still a little bit of a halo here. So I can maybe go wider next time, or we go back and go wider. But look at how I have my nebulosity in here near the star. I didn't kill it off, and there's don't have that pattern anymore. Here is what it would have looked like if I didn't do that. Which again, color masking and various things and post-processing is going to clean up, magenta, reduction. It's going to clean this up quite a bit. But I think everybody would agree, if you're dealing with the one on the right versus the left, I'd take the one on the right, and still got the nebulosity, and you can actually see more detail of the nebulosity here because of toning down the channels that had more of that pattern in it. It's allowing the ones with nebulosity to shine through more, and really knocks that star down. You can see even see the stars behind here better. So that is what I wanted to share. I'm working on potentially a video for the Butterfly Nebula IC 1318. If that turns out well and is useful, I'll be posting that. But I really wanted to get this out because I was in the middle of that photo process and realized that this might be helpful for people. I'm going to go back and reprocess some of my old photos, get some of that pattern out there. Plus, I've learned a ton more on processing in general for those data sets. There's new AI tools and so much to apply to that old data that I plan on doing that as well. I know I've been away for a while, but I had one video in January, my case video. Check that out. That case is fantastic. For those of you who've been following along, appreciate you watching all my videos and hanging in there for new content. Till next time, take care.